Hello, it's Franklin Jones again, the author of The Black Matrix. I sincerely believe that the information that I'm trying to spread is the most shadow banned and deleted content on white media platforms because it's the truth that we're not supposed to talk about. It's the truth that our oppressors don't want us to know. They want to keep our minds believing in things like biblical fairy tales and a silly slave syndrome myth. And they want to keep our minds in those directions, believing those things, because those things keep our understanding of our plight and condition flawed. If our understandings are flawed, then all liberating remedies that stem from those misunderstandings will also be flawed. That's why they want us to believe all those falsehoods. Usually people have a right to believe whatever they choose to believe. However, there's a profound exception to this rule when it comes to the oppressed. The oppressed must gain a clear, concise, and accurate understanding of their plight and condition in order to liberate themselves. Because if our understandings are flawed, then all liberating remedies that stem from those misunderstandings will also be flawed. By keeping us believing that our plight is connected to a Bible written by our most ungodliest enemies, this keeps our minds buried in a Bible, waiting on a fictional Jesus to come save us to the benefit of system white supremacy. By believing that our conditions will result of a silly slave syndrome, this keeps us believing that there's something inherently wrong with us, which also benefits the system of white supremacy. The truth of our plight and condition is directly connected to the white society's monopoly over information that we receive. Their greatest power over us is the fact that they create the narratives that we believe. And they distort those narratives to keep us thinking and behaving in ways that serves and benefits the white society. It's in fact truly how they mentally enslave us. And those of us who do not critically think never notices our mental change. Case in point, many black people now insist to believe the version of slavery as taught by the white society, that most of our enslaved ancestors were fairly purchased. Now, this is designed to make us view the white society's enslavement of us as being less immoral, and it shifts the blame of slavery more greatly upon Africans. And this also adds to the narrative that we are our own worst enemies. It was the wretchedness of our blackness that enslaved us because our own people sold us off. But critically think, during slavery, Africans had all the gold, all the diamonds, all the minerals, all the natural resources. And Western money had no value whatsoever in Africa. In fact, the West had nothing that Africans needed. So what then did the white society use to purchase the majority of the slaves? If you believe the majority of the slaves was sold away, how did they purchase those millions of Africans? And why wouldn't they exploit their weaponry advantage of guns and cannons to maximize their profit by stealing most of the Africans? Yes, there were Africans who participated in the slave trade, but the majority who did so, they realized they could not, their weaponry, they couldn't overcome the white society's weaponry advantage of guns and cannons. The white society got gunpowder from the Chinese and weaponized it, and they used that weapon, those weaponized weapons against the Africans. So there were Africans who said, okay, you leave our tribe alone and we will help you get the other Africans that we captured. And that's how the Africans' participation in the slave trade was. But we've been given a version that places the blame more greatly upon Africans. The white society constantly gives us misinformation that is designed to make us think in ways that serve the white society. In our schools, even now, today, we are taught nothing about our history prior to slavery. And the white society justifies this by saying that is because we have no history prior to slavery, because we were illiterate and uncivilized. This makes us feel indebted to the white society for enslaving our ancestors. This make us feel grateful for our enslavement. But the hidden reality is completely the opposite. In Africa, the oldest university is in Africa, the oldest encyclopedia, the oldest writings, the oldest mathematical tools, the oldest human prosthetics, the oldest man-made structures are in Africa. The oldest standing kingdom exists in Africa. Africans were the first to build in stone, the first to smelt metal. Africans civilized Europeans, including introducing the daily bag to Europeans. But see, most of us don't know this because we're giving false narratives that are designed to manipulate us to think in ways that serve the white society. Regardless of how intelligent people are, if it's possible to control the information that are fed into their mind, it's entirely possible to control what they believe. The white society exploits their monopoly over information that black people receive to manipulate us to think in ways that benefits the white society. They deter us from even demanding our reparation that we're still owed. Okay? Now, we are owed reparation. After the Japanese were placed in internment camps, when they were released, they were given reparation. After slavery was abolished, the white enslaved were given reparation. After the Jewish Holocaust ended, the Jews were given reparation. The Germans were ordered to pay millions of dollars to them. And the UN and America also supports the Jewish. But no reparation went to black people. So they said, okay, how do they control us more? They have us believing, many of us believe that we are the dregs of the white society. They keep us believing that we commit most crimes. We are the large recipients of welfare. We are the largest ones to get on affirmative actions. Those are false narratives, but that makes us more compliant with white dominance over our lives. It utilizes the immense power that shame has upon the human mind to mentally enslave black people. The reality is this. Most crimes in the U.S. are committed by white people. During the administration of Barack Obama, he tried to have it made it a law that all states had to provide crime by race. The Republicans stopped it. Now, right now, crime by race is we only get it from the feds. And when you look at the feds, you will see that most crimes are committed by whites. Now, why is it that the Republicans and all the other states refused to follow what Obama was saying? Obama wanted to create this law where we could see breakdown by race of who was committing crimes. And the white society said no. They said no because if the truth became known, then it would go against their narrative that black people commit most crimes. They marginalize our image, criminalize our image because it aids them. It creates the facility that aids maintain their white dominance. Most violent crimes in America are committed by Caucasians. Caucasians are also more likely than any other group to commit the acts of matricide and patricide. That's the killing of their parents. Caucasians are also more likely than any other race to kill a family member for financial gain. Caucasians are also more likely than other groups to engage in incest and pedophilia than any other groups. But we never hear these narratives. When people see Caucasians, you think of them as being more morally upright and black people being morally low and more deviant. That's because our society does not function based upon the reality of facts. It functions based upon the narratives. And the white society feeds false narratives into our society. There are black people in America who has never heard a single positive narrative about themselves. Because keeping us believing the fraudulent worst about ourselves is how you maintain dominance over people. You maintain dominance by keeping the people believe that we are the dregs of society. We don't know our true contributions. We don't know that most inventions that have revolutionized the world were either invented by a black person or were inspired by early inventions by black people. Most black people don't know that without black people, we wouldn't have skyscrapers. We only have skyscrapers because African Americans invented the elevator, the air conditioning, and the central heating. We wouldn't have cell phones if it wasn't for the invention of a black person. We wouldn't have the camera on the cell phone or the speaker black on a cell phone. It wasn't for a black inventor. We wouldn't have the internet if it wasn't for Nigerian scientists who developed a supercomputer that allows us to go back and forth on large computers to communicate at the same time. Most people don't know this. We wouldn't have GPS if it was not for a black woman. People are totally clueless of our true narratives. The white society keeps our narrative negative because it affects us. So by keeping our narratives negative and then marginalizing our media images and then having us call ourselves niggers, we're being conditioned to see ourselves through a fraudulent marginalized identity that aids the white society and maintaining their social dominance over us. This is the truth of our plight and condition. They're using social sciences against us. Although we do not face the type of white racism that our grandparents experienced, we're still experiencing white racism. When the blatant tactics used in the past to maintain their dominance over black people became morally unacceptable and resulted in unprecedented unified black protests, they now hire social scientists. They have you thinking that our greatest threat are the skinheads. The greatest threat is the KKK. No. Our greatest threat are the social scientists and the propagandists who works behind the scene unrelentingly manipulating our minds to think in ways that serve the white society. They marginalize our image. They criminalize our image to manufacture societal consent for their mistreatment of us. They use the rap industry to negatively steer our culture. They negatively steer our culture while making us believe we are steering ourselves. Think! Our race has become synonymous with vulgarity. Our music, we say derogatory words. Our women are saying derogatory words. Bitches and hoes and F and this and screw and that. Because we don't control our media images. We don't control our music. The white oppressors does. They determine what goes on the airways. They control and our lyrics are supposed to always fit into certain narratives that serve the system of white supremacy. And these narratives shape society in ways that benefits the white society and exalts the white society and criminalize and marginalize black people. Through their monopoly over information, they've conditioned millions of us to perceive ourselves through a false inferior identity. I went into schools talking to high schools, talking to students. I remember in high school, black students in the back of the class says, man, come on, man. You know us niggas can't build rockets. You know us niggas. We have a perception of ourselves. And this perception of ourselves is a marginalized one and is continually being fed into our minds every day. Many of us know that we are learning more racially affirming facts from each other than we do in school. But most of us don't understand that's a social science. Because in order for a dominant group to maintain their position of social dominance over a subordinate population, they must condition them to accept their subordinate status. And this is achieved by denying the subordinate group of racially affirming information about themselves. We are being denied racially affirming facts about ourselves because it conditions us to accept the white society's dominance over our lives. Social scientists describe the process as instilling a value system into the collective minds of black people that makes us more compliant with white dominance over our lives. Look, there's nothing normal about calling ourselves niggas and bitches. There's nothing normal about sagging our pants. There's nothing normal about any of this. But we've normalized it. And our problem is we don't have any true leaders anymore. So therefore, there's no voice speaking out against the negative social engineering of our culture. We don't have leaders anymore. Remember, after the assassination of Malcolm X and Dr. King, J. Edgar Hoover says the only time there will be another black messiah if we create them, if they create them. So now they handpick their leaders. And the way they are our leaders. And these leaders work for their white society. When they control who is our leaders by giving national platforms to only those that are willing to work with the white society, that are following the rules of the white society. When they find those who are truly speaking liberation, like I'm speaking to you now, they will never give me a national platform. My videos will never go viral because there is a deliberate effort to subdue true liberating information. But we must realize, we must recognize the truth of our plight and condition. We must do it. Every generation has its purpose. Ours is to ours is to wake up, free the minds of our people. Brothers and sisters, it's time to start understanding we are being socially engineered through the white society's monopoly over information. They constantly give us negative information about ourselves and white exalting information about themselves. And this makes us, on a subconscious level, it makes many of us feel subservient towards whites. Think, critically think. Have you noticed that every study results we hear favors whites over blacks? Do you not see how cartoonishly unrealistic it actually is? To have study results so one-sidedly favoring one group over another, as we experience it favoring whites over us, is absolutely ridiculous. It's fraudulent propaganda. Through repetition, it affects how we perceive ourselves. It affects how we perceive whites. It aids them in maintaining their social dominance. It's by design that many black people find it easier to yell at one of their own than to yell at a white person, to hit one of their own, to hit a white person. We are being socially engineered. It's happening through, in the education we're taught, the media we watch, even in the movies and TV shows we watch when we think we're just being entertained. We must start understanding social science. Everything I'm saying to you, black social scientists can confirm this, but they don't. They sit quiet because they have their good jobs, their good jobs are well paid, and they don't talk about it. But everything I'm telling to you is a true social science. We are being manipulated to think in ways that serve as protect the system of white supremacy. The reason why many black people think favorably of whites and negatively of ourselves is because our collective aggressions have been shifted from the white society and redirected against ourselves. It's how the white society prevents us from unifying against the white society. Think about it. Every narrative that a black woman hears about a black man is negative, and they all come from white men. Every negative. They've in fact manipulated black women to believe that black men are running in droves to marry white women. This is how they demoralize black women and make black women resentful towards black men. But if you look at the statistic, you look at the U.S. Census found that 86.5% of black men are married to black women. 90% of black men date black women. Only 7% of black men in America are married to white women. Only 7%. But you are functioning based upon the fraudulent narratives, the fraudulent propaganda, what the media shows you, because the media shapes our value. It shapes our perception of the world. And they distort our perception because keeping us believing negatively of ourselves is how they maintain their dominance. They've conditioned us to believe that there's a shortage of black on black love when the majority of black people love each other. The census shows in America, 91% of black women are married to black men. Only 4% have white husbands. But when you see things in the media, you've been made to believe that we're running a drove to marry whites. See, the way you divide people is by instilling propaganda in their mind, telling them that they're most divided. They then start functioning based upon those narratives, thus making it true. This is called the prophecy of the method. You keep saying something and we make it true. It could even be used in the reverse. If you have a group of people who are very divided, and you keep putting out propaganda that they're the most united, the most united, the most united, they will start functioning based upon a narrative. They will start being more friendlier. People function based upon a narrative they receive about themselves. The white society keeps us believing that we're the most divided, we're the worst, we're our worst enemies. And it's how they control us. It's how they control us. We walk into a room, we see another black person, we're mean mugging. Because they have conditioned us to perceive ourselves through a false identity that benefits themselves. Until you wake up to this reality, above a biblical fairy tale, a Bible written by our enemies will never set us free. A Bible brutally beat into the minds of our ancestors will never provide our salvation. A Bible written by history's most ungodliest people is inherently disqualified from being the true words of God. A Bible that condones slavery is disqualified from being the true words of God. Wake up and critically think. We have to start recognizing that the white society uses social sciences against us for maintaining their dominance over us. We must learn these social sciences and develop counter strategies against them. Their greatest power is their monopoly over our minds. They start brainwashing us from the time our minds are young during our early education development. And it continues from pre-K all the way to 12th grade. After we graduate, we're constantly being bombarded with propaganda in the movies, TV. We keep being told we're less than them, we're worse than them, and we're our own worst enemy. And we therefore need them to govern over our lives. They always tell us we're in a crisis. Black people are in some kind of crisis. We're trying to save black people. Even their narrative for being in Africa, they have many people believe that the reason why the Western society are so invested in Africa is because Africans can't govern themselves, and they're here trying to save the Africans. They're trying to save the pitiful Africans. When in reality, they're in Africa to protect the interests of Western society, because the Western society cannot survive 2 years without Africa's natural resources. Your cell phones and your laptops won't work without a mineral that comes from Africa. The white society is there, but they always create a narrative that exalts and exonerates themselves, that serves their interests. So you have these, that's why you have these poor white trash be saying, go back to Africa, go back to Africa. They don't know the truth. The white masses are ignorant of the true social engineering of the ruling white elites. Our collective minds are shaped by a small group of people. That's why the ruling elites are so angry with the internet. Because the internet allows different opinions, different narratives. Brothers and sisters, we must function based upon truth. And the truth of our plight and condition is something that we've been conditioned to reject. But don't dispute facts you don't understand for lies you've been misled to believe, because doing so will keep you mentally enslaved by the white society. It's time to elevate our minds. It's time to start recognizing that there's a war being waged against us, a covert war being waged against us. And a war so effective and it manipulates our minds so much that many of us are participating in the war. One love and peace.